Maximus Decimus Meridius.
I am your father.
You like Huey Lewis on the news?
Yes. And you're not sure about this, are you?
You're gonna die, clown!
What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss? Sir, the most you ever lost on a coin toss. Call it.
Whose motorcycle is this?
It's a chopper, baby.
Whose chopper is this?
Zed's.
Who's Zed?
Zed's dead, baby.
Bring out today!
This is a tasty burger.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet.
Welcome to the fucking show.
Hello, welcome back to See What Sticks, a podcast about everything and nothing. I'm your host, Russell.
And I'm your co-host, Ben.
And Ben is FaceTiming me for the first time. Ben is back on iOS, so our voice chat call podcast, I forgot the word for what I was talking about, will sound good.
Hopefully I'm crystal clear on that side.
Ben, I think you are crystal clear. I think it's going to, at least in my headphones, which isn't always an accurate representation of the podcast, it sounds pretty good. So, have you had any fun, interesting news since last, whenever we filmed?
Probably the most interesting thing was, upgrading, getting my new iPhone today. And then, I guess going to my advisor to pick out my new classes for next semester. And I think I'm going to be taking a minor as well.
Oh, cool. What's your minor?
I forget the exact name of it, but it's like electronic, it basically boils down to like electronic advertising.
Cool.
Yeah, so something that's kind of practical that I could put along with the film and theater production.
Yeah, definitely. Your film and theater production is your major?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Okay. Right on. See, I was film video, FVS, but I took a bunch of production classes, so my major, title-wise, is that, but like my credentials, I guess you could say, are film and theater.
Okay.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, like, since those titles for those two different majors are so similar, I wonder if a lot of people get into the wrong one.
I think so. I was a comm major before, but if you don't know anything about Purdue Communications, it's a dumpster fire. Not that the program is bad, but the way that you get into the program is very convoluted, difficult, and actually a big turnoff for a lot of students. So I went to my girl Debbie, who's, I'm sure your advisor as well.
Bradford?
Yeah.
Yep.
Debbie's probably my favorite person at Purdue besides Ben Lawton. But yeah, so I went to her and she's like, what do you want to do? I said this, and she's like, here are your two options. I told her what I was thinking, and she told me to do FVS. That's kind of what happened.
Cool.
But I feel like if you're a freshman, half the time you're going to go into the wrong major.
Yeah, most likely. And I mean, statistically, most freshmen will end up like switching majors by the time they get to sophomore or junior year.
Yeah, I switched majors 3 times in college. That's why I did 5 years in college.
Yeah, I think my brother ended up switching 3 times total, and he's 2 years older than me, and he will be finally graduating in the next year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I hope like if he's listening or anybody else, other family, like that's not to say like it's not a disparaging like comment on him.
That's
like I'm completely fucking proud of him for finishing out.
That's so cool. Like that's a big milestone. Good for your brother. Ben's brother, I'm proud of you. And so, Ben, what are you trying to do with your college degree when you finish it, when you're done? What's your goal?
Well, I guess I could say the kind of like bright-eyed, bushy-tail ideal dream would be to like, do production on like television shows or films, stuff like that. Any sort of behind-the-scenes production role. Like I'm down to do any of it. I would really like to get into editing to see like, if I have the chops for that, or camera work. But I think to like in a more grounded sense, just like kind of like more maybe like freelance videography or like small scale production company or something like that.
Yeah.
Or like corporations or companies that are looking for people to shoot like any sort of media for them. Like I think that's a good. There's lots of demand for that, and I think the demand will be growing for that.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Would you? I know this is a very strange topic for the podcast, but I'm going to give you some advice, listener and Ben. Would you be open to the fact that you may need to relocate for some of these jobs?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think, yeah, for small scale, like we're talking like really small scale, the Midwest would probably be okay to stick around in, like maybe Chicago or Indianapolis. But I would be willing to relocate to where the work is. It's just something that's like, definitely going to be an effect on the family. And
of course.
It's a decision for all of us to make. I can't just like uproot my family on my whims alone. This would be something that we would all have to really agree on.
Yeah, it's a joint effort there.
Exactly.
But I will give you a little advice from my job searching and me doing freelance stuff right now. For those of you who don't know, I do freelance stuff right now. The Chicago does have a film industry. It's growing. A lot of it is in sports and news right now, from what I've seen. And I mean, there is Chicago PD and Chicago Fire, which are like on NBC or whatever, or ABC.
Yeah.
There's that. Then there's also this thing called Cinespace, which is essentially, I think, a group of guys probably 15 years ago found an old abandoned warehouse and converted it into a giant film studio with a lot of studio space. So that's the thing. But from my experience and a lot of my friends, they're very good, but a lot of people are applying to them because it's the biggest studio. So they have a bit of a volume of applicants versus positions issue going on in Chicago because there's a lot of film and media schools here, but not as many jobs. LA, of course, and then Atlanta has a lot of stuff.
Yeah, Georgia's a big hub for a lot of television.
Yeah, it's kind of blowing up. And then New York City are kind of the big ones. And I think in that list, Chicago would be fourth on the list, but it's different than the other cities. So Chicago and New York are a lot more TV show, and Atlanta and LA are more movie stuff.
Yeah. And really, depending on how far down the mountain this country is going to be crashing, depending on the leadership and the future of the country, I might relocate to Canada. Depends on. They shoot a lot of things up in Canada.
Yeah, Vancouver and Toronto both have really interesting media markets, especially Vancouver. Vancouver is huge with filming. A lot more movies than you realize film in Canada. Like both Deadpool movies were filmed in Canada.
Right.
If you've ever seen iRobot, the Will Smith one, where they weren't in Chicago, they're in Canada. So a lot of times when they film and they're not in New York and not in Chicago, but it's that kind of cityscape, it's going to be in Vancouver, because Vancouver has architecture like a lot, very similar to a lot of other cities, and you can mask it and kind of fill in the blanks to make Vancouver look like Washington, D.C. You can make it look like New York, Chicago, L.A., minus the palm trees. But yeah, so if that's something you're doing, there are jobs there. And for people listening who are interested in film, there are film jobs. It's a real thing you can do for a living. But it is kind of tricky to find jobs, and there's not really a set path. So that being said, that's my PSA about film for this week. But it's cool. If you like filming and artistic stuff, get a camera, get your iPhone, make a movie. It's really easy.
It's easy. It's easier than ever today to get your content out there. Whether it's going to be picked up or recognized or not, that's completely up to the fate of the universe. But no one's ever going to see something that you don't put out.
Exactly. Like even if you put something out and one person sees it, it's one person that didn't see it before. And that's like how the podcast started, where it would go out to 5 people, and now we get a lot more views. We've pretty much gotten to my first milestone, which is over, like within a 2-week period, over 100 downloads and stuff. So we've passed my first milestone, and hopefully it keeps growing. And thank you to everyone listening. Thank you to sharing it if you share it. Thank you to telling other people if you tell other people. And yeah, but that was some interesting news. I don't think I have much news since last week. Kind of nothing has happened. It's my mom's birthday this Friday. Happy birthday, Mom. I know it's not Friday yet, but happy birthday, Mom.
Another September birthday. Mine's on Sunday.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Nice. Oh, your birthday is September 30th?
It sure is.
Nice. Right on.
Inching closer and closer to that mortal coil of death every day.
Ben, if you don't mind me asking, how old will you be? And if you don't want to answer, you can put it on. Ben and I are FaceTiming, so you can put it up with fingers if you don't feel comfortable asking or answering.
Zero. I care zero.
Okay.
Who knows my age? So I'll be 31.
Oh, cool. Right on. Okay, I was thinking you were 29, so I guess you're 30. Okay. Because I did some mental math, and I guess I was off.
Yep, I am an 80s baby.
Nice. See, I'm a 90s kid. So that's with what we're talking about today, which is video games and games we like growing up and still like, we will have big differences because
we will.
We are 8 years apart. Yeah, we're 8 years apart.
And in the gaming industry, that's a lifetime.
It is.
That is a lifetime, depending on, like, just kind of the general structure of games, the difficulty of games.
Yeah.
The consoles of 8 years, that's an entire generation of gaming consoles between us.
Yeah, it really is. So let's get into that. So let's, you can go first. I'll ask the question. Ben, do you like video games?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite pastimes. I still game. I currently I'm on a PlayStation 4 console. And yeah, I guess I thought I had more to say about that. Yeah, but yes, I do game. I love gaming. Still do it.
Yeah, I also love video games. I actually don't own a console at the moment. So people are going to freak out, but right now I only own 2 Mac computers, but there's this thing called NVIDIA GeForce where it's essentially like Netflix for games, and you essentially use their servers to run any game on your Mac based on your internet speed. And luckily, my internet speed at my house is quite fast, so I can play games at like 4K, and I have a 5K monitor, so I can play games at that resolution. So, excuse me.
Is it called the like NVIDIA Shield?
Yes.
Is what? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have all of that. Just because I sold my Xbox in college, just because I didn't really have time for it at the time, and now I regret that. But I've made do with this, playing games on Steam. The only problem is I can't play my Halo. Actually, I probably could play Halo, but I can't play my Halo, and I can't play my PS4 exclusives because I had a PS3, and I had an Xbox 360. So,
and PS4 exclusives. Sony has knocked it out of the damn ballpark this generation with exclusive. God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, Spider-Man. I just platinumed that this past week. All their exclusives are fan-freaking-tastic this generation.
They really are. Also, I will say, before we really get into this, I am not an expert on video games by any means. On pop culture, if you have to categorize it, video games are probably my weakest front. I know about video games, I can like talk about it with people, but if there's a die-hard gamer, I can't keep up like the way I could with music or movies or TV. So that being said, let's get into it. And if you totally disagree, I'm sorry, but I'm not an expert on this. I just like playing video games, and I thought people would like to hear. So Ben, what was the first console you had growing up, or the first one if your brother's older than you?
Yeah, by 2 years.
Okay, so the first one you and your brother and your family had.
We had an original Nintendo Entertainment System.
Oh, okay, cool. So you had NES.
That was my first experience with kind of gaming, the classics like the original. We had this cartridge that had 3 games in one on it. It had Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and Track and Field.
Ooh,
all in
cool.
the same cartridge. Yeah, and it was like this. It probably came with the console, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
And and I came with the bundle, like the laser shooter for Duck Hunt.
Yeah,
and then like the track and field pad, the power pad that you plugged into, that you just basically stomped on as fast as you can to get a sprint in. But yeah, that was my first console. What about you?
My first console technically could have been Nintendo 64, but the first one that I got was GameCube. But I am in the N64 era, so like I could have been one of those, but I did not get one. Later, actually, one of my roommates in college and I bought one, and I just let him have it. So I did get around to the whole N64 experience, retroing it being that guy. So it's not like I missed out on N64, and I can talk N64 with you. Maybe better than I could have if I played it as a kid.
Right.
Because I played it as an adult. But talking like NES and N64, what was your favorite game from that and those two kind of generations of video gaming?
Let's see. For Nintendo, for the first NES, I think Super Mario Brothers 3 was one of the games that I put the most time into.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's probably the game I remember most fondly. I was, for like games like Legend of Zelda, I think I was almost too young to really know how to dive into that game because it was such an expansive, big game, and it was a whole different monster than, you know, just a simple platformer like Super Mario Brothers. But I think I remember most vividly like stuff like Mega Man and Super Mario Brothers 3 for the NES. We also had, I remember actually quite vividly the Christmas that my brother and I got a Super Nintendo as our kind of big family gift. And my favorite games from those were the Donkey Kong Country series.
You know what?
Those
were fantastic.
Awesome. And particularly the second one, Donkey Kong Country 2, that game's fucking hard. It's
yes.
really hard.
That's something I'm going to ask. So, going back and playing some games that you thought were hard as a kid, do you still think they're hard?
Some of them. Some of those platformers like Mega Man 2 in particular, and a couple of the others throughout that series, you really need to have some like precision controls and like jumps on those games because like they're pretty unforgiving.
Yes.
And the difficulty level on those kind of rivals some of the harder games like, you know, in the modern era of gaming, because it's just like the developers were just like, you know what, you're going to do it our way. You're going to pain through these games without, you know, for some of them without even being able to save. You're going to sit down for 4 hours and try and beat this game, and if you don't, too damn bad. We're not giving you, you know, any sort of head start or any sort of easy way out of this.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think my least favorite game, if I'm going to just say that outright, it's going to be everyone's for N64. It's Superman N64. I did play it when I was a kid, even though I did not personally own an N64. I did play it a lot as a child. I had a lot of friends who had them, and like family members. So I did play that. And then when I was older, I bought it again. But it was like at Five Below bucks, if you know what that is.
Yeah.
And they had like an N64 there for like literally $25, and then a bunch of different games for like $15, $20. It was all used, but I think I went out of there with like spending like $80 and got probably a lifetime's worth of N64 stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So
Superman 64, that game's notoriously bad.
Yeah, it's just flying through those colored rings in a weird city, and it feels so half baked that it's not even funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was my least favorite game. If we're going to talk NES and N64 games, which for those of you who are listening who may not know, these are both Nintendo systems. So these are Nintendo games. So you're not going to see the Halos here. You're not going to see those kind of things here yet.
That generation's Halo was a little game called GoldenEye.
That is on my list as probably, if I had to do a top 15 games of all time to like wuss out and do 15, GoldenEye would probably be 15 just because of all the hours as a kid, like at sleepovers, playing that, and your friends being like, you can't play as Oddjob because you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. But that game was so fun. Yeah.
I think a lot of commentary I read, like modern commentary I read about GoldenEye now, was that a lot of people say like, oh, it's not really as good as you thought or you think it was. I tend to disagree sort of with that. I think it's a good game still. But just, I think the kind of critique coming from that is it's half-assed because they're comparing it to these modern shooters that have perfected the formula for it. Like, Call of Duty and Halo, like, you know, back then, GoldenEye was as good as it got.
Yeah, it really was. And you have to grade these on a curve. You can't compare the two. That's like comparing a Model T to a Tesla. Like, yeah, they're both technically cars, but they're in completely different worlds, and you have to look at them as such.
GoldenEye made, like, we all know, like, how big, well, I shouldn't say we all know, most of us know how big TVs were back then. On the
Yep.
64s. They were small. They were small as hell.
And they were tube
And
TVs.
and somehow GoldenEye made playing forward player split screen on a small ass TV. They made it work.
They did, and it was like 9 pixels across, but you still could play. And then now when people are playing a game and they complain like, oh my god, it's only in 1080 and it's like at medium settings, I'm like, dude, go back 15 years or even 20 years and play that and then like complain about what you're doing right now. Like, our video games today are legitimately simulations.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
It, like, if you took these games back to, let's say, like 1983, people would blow their brains out with like how crazy it looks. Like, people wouldn't believe it. Even like looking at Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, which I mean, the graphics on those aren't 100% up to what else we have. But if you gave that to a kid in the 80s, they'd go crazy.
Yeah, they would think they were the like coolest kid in the universe.
Yeah.
For being able to play that.
And like, I think we just take it so for granted that our games are great now. But yeah, let's talk about some of these N64 games. So I have a list that I have up, and if you just type in N64 games, the list that comes up is Super Smash Bros., Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, Mario Party 3, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, Star Wars Rogue Squadron, GoldenEye, Mario Party 2, Diddy Kong Racing, and Star Fox are the ones that come up as the top of the list.
Right.
I tend to disagree with some of those.
Which ones?
Okay, Rogue Squadron was cool. I don't think it should be that high on this list or on the first page. I do agree with Super Smash Bros. Because that game kind of was accidentally genius.
It was ahead of its time, absolutely, and it created this sort of its own thing. Like, Super Smash Brothers is its own sort of corner of gaming now.
Yeah. There are people who still play that game religiously, the 64 one, because they're like, that's the most pure version or whatever. I have played every single version of it. Is the Switch one out yet? I don't know. If
It is not. It's very close. I think it's within a couple months of being released.
See, this is how much I don't know about games right now. But I've played all of them until the Switch one, and if you're listening to this in the future, I might have played it by then. But I think that and Mario 64, probably out of all the games that I just listed, is the one I pumped the most amount of hours into.
Mario 64 was nuts.
Yeah, I think it was
the fact that they bundled that with the 64 when it was first released.
Yeah.
Like, a game of that like Nintendo just doesn't. They don't do that anymore unless it's a special bundle. Like, they don't bundle Mario games with their consoles anymore, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah.
Like, people that are buying consoles now, they won't know like that's how they used to do it.
Yeah, and I think it's really kind of weird for, like, say your kids are kind of young for buying like a PS4 and playing like Dead Space, which I know isn't a franchise anymore, or like playing the new Tomb Raider. So your kids are a bit young for that. But like, think about kids in 5 years, kind of like when your kids are 5 years older and they're like, I want an Xbox or PS5 or whatever. They won't know how cool it was to get one of the best games in the library of that generation with the console just straight up. Because Mario 64 is almost, I would call it a Mario simulator more than a Mario game. Because it made you feel like Mario going through the different paintings, and it made you feel like an actual cartoon character running around, jumping and swimming, and it just brought this two-dimensional world to 3D. And I think that and one other game have done it better than anyone else ever, the switch from 2D to 3D. And I'll get into the other game in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, and I totally agree. Yeah, it was revolutionary, absolutely, by taking it like this classic 2D platformer that everyone knows about, and then just been like, okay, here are whole entire worlds that you can just run around in. Take that little joystick on the 64 controller, go wherever the hell you want. And that game is so deep in like collecting like coins and stars and all the things that you can do within each little world. Like, yeah, the replay value on that is just insane.
It really is. Like, you can go back to that now. I know they released it on the DS, and I think you can play it on the Wii. But you can go back to that game today in 2018 and still enjoy it just as much. And it's one of those games that has aged so gracefully, same as Mario Kart have aged so well. It's kind of unreal. Like, I don't think many other games, there's a few I'll list later, that will age as well as Mario has, and even the newer games will. But did your parents call it Mario or Mario?
Mario.
Okay, cool, same.
Yeah. Here's the thing with 64. Like, I actually did not have a 64 for that generation. My parents got me this new console called a Sony PlayStation.
Oh.
So that's what I had. All my friends, with the exception of Chris, me and him, and I guess my other friend Alan, we were the ones that had like PlayStations. Everyone else had 64s. So it was kind of like cool going over to a friend's house and playing 64s. And it was like this kind of out of reach, like cool piece of technology where everyone went over there to have like party sessions with games.
Yeah.
But yeah, excuse me. But that's the thing I always thought about with 64 was with that list you gave, with the exception of Zelda, Rogue Squadron, and even in that, I think that was partially multiplayer.
Yeah.
Every single one of those other games were like party style games.
Yes.
Like multiplayer heavily party style, and I think that's what the 64 did best.
Yes, it was a big community thing, and we'll get into that a little later as well, why I think that's going away, and why we should have more of it. I recently had an experience where I had some friends over, noting we're all in our like mid-20s, and we wanted to play a game that was multiplayer split screen, and the only one we could find to play was Halo 3. That was like fun and engaging, and we could all play, and the servers are still up, or you can just do local. But Halo 3, which came out in like 2006 or 7, was kind of the last really good one that we found. I know like Halo ODST and Halo 4 probably have compatibility for it, split screen, but it doesn't have that same magic. And we're going to get into that, I think, about losing that magic in gaming.
Yeah, and I think I know a reason also why that doing split screen multiplayer is not as enjoyable today as it was back then. But I can save that reason for them as well.
So moving away from the N64, what was your opinion of the controller?
The 64 controller was, I think, thinking about it now, not the greatest.
Yes.
It was definitely like this odd looking, like different design for a controller, which Nintendo does very well.
Yeah.
Is making odd design choices that sometimes work, sometimes don't. But back then, I think it worked well enough because it was like, this is different than what PlayStation offered, which was like, PlayStation kind of offered the first take on the pretty much the universal modern design of today's gaming controller. Like 2 joysticks, which I guess the original didn't have joysticks, but 4 buttons, a D-pad, start, select. Super Nintendo had that before, but everyone has copied or made some sort of evolution on the original PlayStation controller since then.
Yes. I 100% agree. I think the N64 controller has this special kind of nostalgia value, but if you look at that controller very objectively, it doesn't make sense.
No, it does not.
It needs a third hand.
Yeah, I think there were games that were designed with that controller in mind, like Ocarina of Time, playing the ocarina with the yellow C buttons.
Yes,
I think that's where it works the best, when there was games specifically designed around the controller.
Yeah, when the functionality.
Other than that, it's kind of a mess.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to do this whole running joke throughout the entire episode that I had written down in my notes that I'm not going to use because I read through them and I'm like, that's not a good idea. But I was going to do all this like board games and just keep starting it with different board games, but I'm not going to do that because that'd be really obnoxious. Because I had a whole list of notes just in board games, and I looked up the years they were released because I'm weird. And I have way too much time on my hands, apparently, to do that kind of research. But that being said, let's talk about probably, in my opinion, you can totally disagree. We can kind of talk GameCube as well. We kind of talked PS an N64 and GameCube are quite similar in a lot of ways. Like the games that are great for GameCube are adaptations and kind of refreshes of games that were great for the N64.
I can agree with that. I would say that GameCube matured in a way for single player games. Like they had a bigger selection. In particular, which one of the more surprising exclusives they had, which was a single player, was Resident Evil 4.
Yes.
And I guess the remake of the original Resident Evil. Those were GameCube exclusives for quite a long time. And
I think,
damn fine games.
I think GameCube did something else. When you said it matured, it also put more mature games out there.
Yes, absolutely.
Not just by the term mature as in M-rated, but mature as in topic matter as well, and kind of games that weren't just geared for your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, and you. They were geared more towards this a little more gritty. Even if they weren't rated M, they were a little grittier. And I think that has maybe in some cases not helped them age as much. And it kind of dates some games. Whereas if you have a Mario that's very family friendly, kind of like a G-rated movie, it ages better than certain like PG-13 rated movies.
Right.
And I mean, if people listening totally disagree, you're allowed to. Like, that's fine. This is totally my opinion. But that being said, I'm going to completely contradict myself. And we're going to talk something on the PS2 that might be in my top 5 favorite games of all time. It's definitely, I think, my favorite series of all time. And we're going to talk Grand Theft Auto.
All right.
And when I said earlier that Mario made the transition from 2D to 3D very gracefully, so did Grand Theft Auto.
It did. And it was a kind of a cultural phenomenon, Grand Theft Auto 3, when that came out. And especially its kind of like quasi sequels like Vice City and San Andreas.
Yeah.
That kind of kept perfecting the formula for the PlayStation 2 era. Yeah. Holy crap. Yeah. Grand Theft Auto games, those were huge and they were good games.
They were. I had all of the GTA games. I've purchased every GTA game. I had GTA like 2 on an emulator, so I never was able to purchase it, but I got it on an emulator, and I had to pay for the emulator pack. So I guess, but let's talk a little bit of Grand Theft Auto and what that really signified for games, culture, and kind of our media and how we see the United States. And if you look at it, what you really think of that game in 2018, or those three. Which is 3 Vice City and San Andreas. So, what do you think about that?
They each kind of differently portray a part of like Western and American culture in a different way. Obviously, they take place in different timelines. Like GTA 3 was that came out probably 2001, 2002.
It was 2001.
2001. Okay. That was set in its own time.
Yeah.
Vice City was of the 80s and had the 80s like neon and the Age of Excess painted all over it.
Yeah.
And Vice City, of those 3 PlayStation 2 era ones, Vice City's my favorite.
I tend to agree with you on that. And then San Andreas takes place in like 1992 or 1993.
Yeah, early 90s Los Angeles or Los Santos.
Yeah, so it's, for those of you who don't know, for the one person maybe listening out there who doesn't know Grand Theft Auto it is a video game franchise based on being a protagonist. Usually you're kind of an anti-hero, you're a mafia, you're in a gang, and you're kind of a shady character. And the point of the game is to build your way up from your low life standards to becoming like a kingpin or a boss or running the show instead of having the show run you. That, in the simplest terms, is what Grand Theft Auto is all about. And the name of the game is Grand Theft Auto, which is a crime for stealing cars, which is a big mechanic in the game.
And which is probably like the least severe crime you can commit in those games.
I don't even think you get a star or any kind of wanted level for stealing a car, unless it's a cop car.
Yeah, definitely a cop car. I think you go all the way to like 3 or 4 automatically.
Yeah.
I think you might get 1 star if you steal a car in front of a cop or like with a police officer in the vicinity of the crime.
Yeah. I love Vice City. I probably put more hours into Vice City than I'd like to admit, but San Andreas did something special, and I think it made the biggest open world for its time.
Yeah, I think each Rockstar game, as far as their open world stuff, their maps get bigger with each one.
Yes.
Yeah, San Andreas was the biggest of those three, and then with 4, Liberty City, did its version of New York City. 5 did went back to Los Santos, but it made the city and like the surrounding county, all part of it, and it was just a gigantic map. And something I'm very excited about, not Grand Theft Auto, but I mean, still in the same vein, Red Dead Redemption 2 comes out mid-October, and the map on that is supposed to be just stupid large.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about open world games. So, also my favorite PS2 game is a game called War of the Monsters. I'm just putting it out there. That is my favorite PS2 game of all time. It's not God of War. It's none of those. It is War of the Monsters. But yeah, I just had to put that out there for people who are wondering. But let's talk open world games and kind of the evolution of that with GTA in mind and talking about Mario 64. So, what do you think of open world games?
I do enjoy them. I think they've gotten to the point where it's harder to justify a lot of linear games because of the success and the detail that go into these open world games. Like Rockstar kind of made it so that if you make a linear path, like style of game, it better be damn good for it to not have this sort of open or semi-open world for you to kind of explore.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think the last game that I played that I really enjoyed that was not an open world game was Wolfenstein 2.
That's a fantastic game, yeah.
That was the last very linear game besides BioShock Infinite and the BioShock series, which I'll talk about a little bit later. That really, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. It's a story, and I'm done with it in whatever, like 10 hours, 12 hours, whatever it was. And I'm cool with that, because if you're paying $15 for a movie ticket that's 2 hours, I'm fine with paying $60 for a game that lasts 12 hours. You're getting your money's worth. That's my mantra and my philosophy on video games and pricing.
I agree.
What is your favorite open world game of all time?
Red Dead Redemption.
Okay, that is
right now. And I could say like that might change in a few months after I've finished too. But yeah, Red Dead Redemption it's one of my it's in my top 3 of all time. Any game. I
think I logged 1,000 hours into Red Dead. Easily.
I probably came pretty close too.
Yeah, Red Dead came out. What year did that come out? Like 2010?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that game was a phenomenon. And there's a Red Dead before that people don't know about.
Loosely related. It was called Red Dead Revolver.
Yes.
I don't think Rockstar was a developer for that. I think they purchased the rights to the name and kind of the franchise, and then they just ran with their own idea.
That there's another game similar to that called Just Cause. It's not a Western, but Square Enix and another company bought the rights, I think, during Just Cause 2, which is one of my favorite games. And Just Cause 3, which I play pretty consistently, it just takes that to another level, which we'll talk about in open world games. But I think my favorite open world game of all time, it's going to be the most cliche answer, it's probably GTA 5.
There's so much to do in that game. And hell, I mean, they've supported it up to this point with, especially with GTA Online.
I think that's going to end very soon with Red Dead.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they develop Red Dead Online. Obviously, it's going to have to be different in some aspect because you can't just run around with shark cards and credit cards, like purchasing stuff. It's probably, I would guess, if I were to hazard like a guess about how you're going to make money. Obviously, you're going to be looting or bank robbing, like robbing trains and all that. But I'm just wondering like how you're going to build like your empire or your kind of your outlaw gang.
Yeah, I am very curious about that as well. And you brought up something very, very interesting in video games today. The shark cards. Can you explain what that is for people who don't know?
I will try my best. Shark cards are basically GTA Online's currency for purchasing cars, weapons, clothing, anything that you really want that is purchasable in order to play like GTA Online. The thing is, you have to buy these cards with real money, with US dollars or euros, wherever you're playing. So it goes into this it's almost a pay to win formula for GTA Online. Like,
yes,
you can play without having to spend a single dime outside of buying the core game itself, but you're going to be at a severe disadvantage to people that have been loading in hundreds of dollars to try and be the best. And there's a big community of people that really do not like that formula for online gaming.
I hate microtransactions. That is what that is called for people.
That was the term I could not think of.
They're microtransactions. So for those of you who don't know, I can give you a very quick explanation of two different versions. When you're on the App Store or Google Play Store and the game says it's free, but you can't do everything without paying, those are microtransactions. Or if you need to unlock levels by paying for them, or you can unlock levels by just paying and then you get to skip everything, those are all microtransactions. So some of them are pay to win, but then there's other games where it's just you pay to get different like skins and outfits, just cosmetic things that don't affect the level of playability of the game. I don't mind those at all. I think that's fine. If you want to pay for it, dude, that's fine. But if you don't want to, you have the exact same gaming experience. I'm 100% cool with that.
Agreed.
But for those of you who may not know, we'll get back to open world games in a second. There was a big problem with microtransactions very recently with a Star Wars game. Well, with two Star Wars games. Ben, do you wish to fill in the audience on what happened and why it's a big deal?
So the big one that was it blew up in Electronic Arts, or EA for short, as we'll refer to them from now on. It blew up in their face was with Star Wars Battlefront 2. It's their first-person shooter version. It's basically the formula for Battlefield. If the listeners have ever played that, Battlefield 1942, or it's kind of the more methodical, slower-paced version of Call of Duty, and more team-based, squad-based, however you want to refer to it as. But Star Wars, and this particular one in Battlefront 2, they had in microtransactions to where you could buy your way up, you could buy your way into a higher level essentially, and then be Darth Vader level powerful against a stormtrooper basically.
Yes.
2 days after you bought the game. So it basically makes it completely unfair for people that just want to have a fun time on a multiplayer match when they're getting slashed left and right, killed one after the other by these people that pay their way to be a level 50 or something like that. So that's the major problem with these types of microtransactions, is it doesn't make it fair. Yes,
that is probably the best way you could state that. And then there's other games like Fortnite, and maybe we'll get into that at the end, that you can buy stuff for the game. You can change what you look like, change your skin, but it does not affect how good you are at the game. That game, right. It practice makes perfect with games like that. Or like Rocket League is the same. Like if you practice enough, you get good. It doesn't really matter what you look like.
And another thing for Battlefront that I just thought of that was another major factor for why people were throwing shit fit over it, was that EA's kind of explanation or how they did it, you came to find out, was that they said like, oh yeah, you can definitely just play without paying a dime, for these microtransactions. You can earn your way through, your hard work and earning up, gaining levels to work your way towards playing like Darth Maul or Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker. You came to find out that they purposefully engineered the game to where there wasn't a consistent leveling up speed to get there. So once you were getting farther down the game, it would make it slower and slower, and not out of the normal rate. Obviously you need more points as you get higher levels to get to the next level. They made it so where they wanted people to get so frustrated with how long it took that they would finally buckle down and just
throw their money
fork over cash for these microtransactions. That's exactly their plan, and they got called out for it, and then they basically had to they had to abandon that that way of doing their hosting their game, and they're like, okay, we'll get rid of microtransactions. They'll be completely cosmetic now,
which I think is good. And going into that, what is the most lucrative piece of media of all time? Single disc piece of media. So it can be a DVD, it can be an album, it can be a movie, but single disc piece of media. What is the most lucrative one of all time?
I'm assuming you have an answer for this.
Yes.
And you're just kind of posing the question.
Yes.
I don't know for sure, but I want to say that it's video game based.
It is. It is a video game. It is GTA 5 that has made over $5 billion. And
Simply
it has,
through GTA Online, I'm assuming.
Yes. A giant chunk of that is GTA Online, which we established a little earlier through Ben's explanation, is through microtransactions, which is not always, but a lot of times is kids who are using their parents' debit card to buy things in the game. And yeah, sometimes it's adults who want to buy stuff as well. But a lot of it is like, when you think of a gaming kid, like playing Call of Duty or Halo, it's a lot of that kind of thing, which isn't bad. But it's a lot of that kind of character who buys these microtransactions. That's where they make a lot of their money, which isn't exactly fair. And I mean, if people want to spend it, but it shouldn't affect the gaming at all.
Yeah, it borders on predatory.
Yes.
For some of their practices that they try and get people to spend money on their games.
For GTA, the way they've gotten around it is because you're buying exactly what you're buying. Like, you know what you're getting. Which I still don't think is cool, but it's fine. The reason that EA had to take it out of Star Wars is because it's in this thing called crates. So you pay money and it's a random crate. What happened is when they took that to like Supreme Court or whatever, the lawyers arguing against it said it was gambling, which it technically is. And you can't have gambling in a video game that has kids. And also, you can't have gambling in video games anyway. It's not actually allowed. So that's why it has to be taken out when you get these like surprise crates that influence the game that actually aren't just cosmetic. That is gambling. And it is fundamentally wrong and kind of against the idea of having fun playing this game, having this release valve. And yeah.
It kind of, for us kind of older gamers that remember the days when consoles didn't even have an internet connection. It does kind of make you pine for those days where you bought a game and you got the game.
Yes.
Like I appreciate DLC and like extra story stuff that comes with certain games, and maybe even like the extra map packs for Call of Duty and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I just kind of sometimes I get woefully depressed about like the olden days where I'm like, man, I dropped $40 on a game and I knew what I was getting, and I got good content out of it. I didn't get half-assed, games that were released not completely or not fully complete and had to get a 8 gigabyte patch on the first day, which makes me wait 2 more hours before I can actually play it. Yeah, it's just the simpler times, I guess.
Yeah, so you brought up a few good points. Yes, the simpler times, I agree, like the original Halo, even Halo 2 and 3, it didn't have that. I think even ODST didn't have that, which was after Halo 3. But I think Halo Reach started having it. The Call of Duties are what's it's really famous for, or are really famous for having microtransactions. We're not even going to get into PC gaming like Counter-Strike, which is a completely different rabbit hole to go down.
Oh, yeah.
Which is why we're not touching that. And I'm not really going to touch the whole Game Boy and the PSP, that whole thing. That's another conversation for a different time. We will have another one about mobile gaming. We'll do another conversation because that's a completely different genre and it's a different world. So
it's aimed at a different audience overall.
Yeah, and that's why we're not going to touch it here. And for people who are wondering, that's why. That is a different conversation that we will have on the podcast. But when looking at the good old days versus now, I think games, as much as the game frustrates me, a game like Cuphead, if you know what it is, It's actually all hand drawn. It's in like the 1940s Disney style. The game is impossibly difficult. It's a platformer kind of like Mario, but it's very fast paced and frustratingly hard. But the game has no microtransactions. It is what it is. You get what you see what you get, and that is it. And when you're done with the game, you're done with the game. And I appreciate that. And another game that did that quite well with some DLC, which is fine, is The Witcher 3 and the Witcher series in general. Which have kind of, in a weird way, become sort of a cultural phenomenon and benchmark for new games. People rate them against The Witcher.
That's true. Yeah, The Witcher, especially The Witcher 3, I think it's been their CD Projekt Red, the developer of the game. Yeah, The Witcher 3 has definitely been their cash cow, culturally and financially, I guess. Because it was such a highly regarded game. I have it sitting on my PlayStation hard drive. I've yet to dive into it because I have such a large backlog.
Yeah,
and everything's going to be taking a backseat to when Red Dead comes out next month.
On Red Dead, I want to know your opinion on something. So when GTA 5 came out in 2013, it came out for the Xbox 360 and the PS3. A year later, it came out for the Xbox One and PS4, and then like 8 months after that, it came out for the PC. That's how I have it, is on my PC. But I did have it on the Xbox 360 as well. Do you think Red Dead Redemption will do that? Will they wait a year for PC people to get the game, or do you think they'll do it like around Christmas? Like, what do you think?
Based on Rockstar's track record of kind of giving PC players the shaft in the beginning of the game, of their major game launches, I think they will not support PC at the beginning. I think it's going to take it a little bit before it gets to PC after after they've run their course for the consoles.
Okay, I was thinking a very similar thing, and I was hoping maybe you disagree and you'd be like, no, I definitely heard this thing. But I hate to be this way, I think I might buy a PS4 for Spider-Man and Red Dead. Like, I might have to. And I
can vouch for Spider-Man. It's a fantastic game. It's a fantastic Spider-Man story.
That is what I've heard.
Yeah, like Insomniac Games, they got the story down like perfectly, and it's a surprising story. It's a very heartfelt story. Mm-hmm. And the gameplay is definitely awesome. Like swinging around New York City as Spider-Man feels awesome.
Yeah,
I guess the one thing from a critical standpoint, the one thing I could knock it on is some of the side missions do get a bit repetitive.
Okay,
but that's natural in a game like this. I mean, that's the kind of critique that's coming from someone like me that could never design a fucking game like this in a million years. So,
I agree.
Kudos to those guys for creating such an awesome game. And the one last thing I'll say about it is, I don't usually go like trophy chasing in these kind of games, like collectible chasing or whatever. Like grab this, go out and find all these different
the backpacks.
The backpacks. Specifically for Spider-Man, I don't usually do that. Spider-Man made it fun to find all these collectibles and do all the missions, and it's the first game I've truly 100% completed.
That's really cool. That's always good to hear when a game makes the side objectives super compelling. On that, one of my favorite games of all time, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, so I love Shadow of Mordor. And I haven't played Shadow of War because there's microtransactions, and I don't fuck with that. But I will say the combat system off of those games is based off of a series called Batman Arkham. The third game or fourth game, Batman Arkham Knight, got a lot of shit for not being completely optimized for the PS or the PC when it came out. I have it on the PC now. That game may be my favorite game of all time.
Really?
Okay, so a few things. I'm not a big horror person, but I do like an occasional scare. That's why I like BioShock 1 and BioShock 2. It's fun to be a little bit on your toes. I like that. I also love Batman. I also love the Joker. And, I mean, I'm a DC and Marvel fan, But when you get to play as Batman and drive around in the Batmobile and kick the shit out of people and throw batarangs and grapple onto them and get to fly around Gotham City, it is such a cool and almost liberating feeling to do that. And I'm sure the Spider-Man game does a very similar thing. It almost just feels like a simulator where it puts you in complete 100% control of this character. And it's like, okay, go have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that sort of liberating feeling is what you get like swinging around New York City as Spider-Man, and even being able to dive off the top of Avengers Tower.
Yeah. The closest thing they have to that in the Batman game is diving off Wayne Enterprises Tower.
Yeah. And
just seeing bad guys on rooftops, flying into them, kicking them off the roof, and then flying away. Same with Spidey, just webbing into him, knocking him off a roof, doing some cool stunts, webbing away, and feeling like you have all of the power.
Yeah. I think we're so fortunate. Well, especially me. My favorite DC hero is Batman. My favorite Marvel hero is Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And those two like properties have two of the best video games. I have to give Arkham City, which was the second, the one before Arkham Knight, I have to give that one the edge over Arkham Knight. I think I enjoyed that one a little bit more.
I 100% can see that. I've put way more time into Arkham City, and I think it's a smaller, more confined story, which a lot of people like, but I just love the ability to kind of roam as Batman and kind of just have that extra level of power and this level of control that the last game gave you, because it's the last game in the series, and they're like, we're gonna go out with a bang.
Yeah. I'm waiting. I want Rocksteady to make their next game. I'm sure they're working on something.
The one thing I do want, I think it would be cool to have, there's two games that I've always thought would be very cool. I have always thought a good Superman game would be really cool and lean into the fact that he is a god, basically. And just do that, have him be able to fly, and do Iron Man. I think Iron Man would be such a cool character, a lot like Batman, but just being able to fly, and you can do the same limitations where like your jet, like your propulsors,
his jet feet and jet hands.
Yeah, his flyy feet and his flyy hands. They can run out of juice, and you have to upgrade as you go. And I know there has been Iron Man games, but do it like Spider-Man or do it like Arkham, and really lean into that and make him like a human tank. I think that would be so cool. And having like semi-destructible environments as Iron Man, like bashing people through walls, that is a character that is so fitted for video games, same as Superman, where you could just fly people through buildings and just be a complete powerhouse. Those kind of things can be done in video games now and should be done.
The one thing I would be concerned about Superman especially is, I guess like I think it would need to have a like Dynamite story to really make it compelling, because like playing as a god, like it feels like what enemy could truly beat you.
I think I do agree with you on that. I agree a lot. I think the thing that someone had suggested, maybe, I don't remember what podcast, but what they suggested is Superman doesn't have health. The city has health.
Ooh.
So in a lot of games, for people who aren't gamers, a character has health. That's how you can limit like life and death. And there's like cheats and mods and all that stuff that can prevent that to make the game easier or give you a bigger sense of power. But with Superman, since he's essentially immortal, have the city have health or have other things have health around him, which gives you that same limiting factor, which gives it a challenge, but then you also aren't like nerfing Superman.
Yeah, and also it could give it kind of a sense of urgency.
Yes.
To like get around saving people, saving the city.
Yeah, so like, let's say, for an example, video game people, if you're hearing this, feel free to take these ideas. I think it'd be cool if you have, let's say, Superman is fighting just some street-level bad guys, and he's in a scenario where there's like a hostage, or they're on a rooftop, and you're like destroying the building, but the building you're on has health, and it's starting to crumble, and that is like what's affecting it. So it's giving it that urgency like a health meter would, but it's also giving you the ability to know that you're technically not getting hurt. You're just destroying everything around you because you're a monster, essentially. And that can, once you get better at the game and get more skills, you can become more agile and almost like tactful in your attack. So you're not flying through a building and destroying half the health instantly. You're learning how to become a more refined version of yourself. I think that...
Yeah, I like that idea.
Because if you give Superman a health bar, you're automatically not Superman anymore.
Yeah, unless like something in the storyline was written into like, oh, he swallowed like a kryptonite pill or something like that.
And I don't think they should do that. I think maybe like one of the bosses, like if he's fighting like Bizarro or Lex Luthor or like Doomsday or something, then yeah, you can actually give Superman some health and change it up. But if you just have the city have health or specific buildings or something to give it a sense of you can lose, that'd be cool.
Agreed.
But before like we wrap on video games, I want to know your opinion on like a few things. What do you think of the Elder Scroll games or the Bethesda games?
I played the hell out of Skyrim, and that was my first real, my own personal experience with a Bethesda game. I did watch a roommate of mine, Tim. If he's listening, shout out to Tim. I wish he was here, and we'd be all three of us would be gabbing on. I watched him play Fallout 3 in its entirety, basically.
Yeah.
So that was my first real encounter with Bethesda. But I enjoyed Skyrim. I'm looking forward to 17 years down the road when they finish Elder Scrolls 6 and have that ready.
Hey Tim, if you're listening, come on the show. Ben, invite Tim on the show and we'll talk.
I will.
But no, yeah, Elder Scrolls. My first Elder Scrolls game was Morrowind, which was like 2002. I had Morrowind, and then I had Oblivion, then I had Skyrim, and my first of the Fallout games. So for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim are in the same series, and they are high fantasy. So it's like knights in shining armor, dragons and trolls and all that. Fallout is what it sounds like. It's nuclear apocalypse. And the first one I had that I bought was Fallout New Vegas. Then I bought Fallout 3, and now I have Fallout 4. So yeah, I love those games. I think those games, personally, in a open world sense, are better than The Witcher because you can choose what you look like, you can choose your path, you can make your own enemies, and there is a sense of good and evil in that game. And there's a moral gray area, like if you side with some sides and you side with others. Especially in the Fallout games, there's a lot of moral choices that you have.
I wish I could have played Fallout New Vegas, because I've heard consistently that's like the best Fallout.
It is the best Fallout game. Fallout 4 is cool because you can build like a house like Minecraft style or No Man's Sky style, and I'm not even going to touch No Man's Sky, even though I haven't. I do like it, but you can build stuff and you get the power armor and you can do all that, but the story isn't as good, even though the world is cooler because you're in post-apocalyptic Boston, and it's really, really cool, just what they do with that environment. And the updated graphics and stuff make the game more playable. But Fallout New Vegas is so much more compelling, and it makes you want to know more. Where Fallout 4 kind of doesn't have that.
That's exactly what I've heard. Is just story wise, even some gameplay mechanics wise, like just New Vegas was the peak.
Yes,
so far.
Yes, so far. I would say Fallout 4 is missing a certain je ne sais quoi, a certain charm and style to it that Fallout New Vegas kind of hit. I think maybe by accident.
Yeah, I'm sure. Surely it wasn't expected from the fans.
No,
this offshoot from Obsidian, the developer. I think it wasn't directly like Bethesda Game Works or whatever. People were probably thinking like, oh, okay, it's going to be like a nice, happy little diversion or side piece for what Fallout 3 was, and it turned out to be a fantastic game.
Yeah. Actually, here's another one of my last questions. Do you like first-person shooters?
Yes.
What is your favorite first-person shooter?
My favorite? I guess I would have to qualify those into, because there's different kinds of first person. There's your Call of Duties, but then there's more of your linear like Dooms and Wolfensteins.
Yes.
I'm an unapologetically apologetic fan of the Call of Duty series. I think there are some that are better than others. I think Black Ops 2 and Modern Warfare 2 were the two of the better ones in like the PlayStation 3 and 4 era.
Yeah.
I guess both of those were on PlayStation 3. Yeah. Anyway, I did like Battlefield 1 when it took into World War 1.
Yes.
I played the hell out of that game.
The trenches and stuff, so cool.
Yeah. But then for more of the linear style, I really liked Wolfenstein, the New Colossus.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was like the first one that was rebooted. The most recent, or the reboot of Doom, was very good.
I have played about 20 minutes of it, maybe 30 minutes, on one of my buddy's Nintendo Switches, and it's so cool.
Yeah. They did a hell of a job with kind of bringing that back to the roots of just like heavy metal guitar riffs, ripping off demons' heads, just not a lot of frills, not a lot of over complicated like game mechanics. It's just go in there, load up a shotgun, and blow a fucking demon's head off.
Yup, and I like that a lot. I think my favorite, if I had to pick, I have kind of two. There's a second place, and then there's a first place. A close second place would be BioShock 1. I love BioShock 1. I think
BioShock is great.
I don't love Infinite, and I'm not going to spoil the game, but there's this whole weird multiversey kind of thing that happens in the end, and it just loses me. But besides that, the game is really fun. But BioShock, the original one, is a very cool, compelling, kind of creepy game. I wouldn't call it horror. It's just very creepy and kind of unsettling. It's very fun. It's a lot of fun to play with friends, even though it's single player. It is a lot of fun to play with friends and have one person play and have people watch and kind of go through the game with you, because there's some jump scares and it's really fun. And then my favorite first-person shooter of all time has to be Borderlands. I love Borderlands so much. I love it. It has so much character. You can have like 100 billion different guns. You have like these power-ups and these like crazy things. And as the series has gone on, Borderlands, the pre-sequel, I know people kind of hate it. It might be my favorite because you're on the moon and there is this... you can run out of oxygen if you're on the moon. And it adds this urgency to the game. And it adds this new dynamic where there's also lower gravity, so that adds this dynamic to some of the level design and some of the boss fights. And it's just fun, and it's goofy, and it doesn't take itself seriously in a way that a lot of other games do. It pokes fun at what it is and what it tries to do. And I really like that. I like a game occasionally to kind of be like, I know what I am.
Yeah, I never got into the Borderlands games, but I saw that they had a lot of charm.
Yes.
The reason I didn't get into them was because I had other games occupying my time.
Yes. The original game Borderlands, it's by an Australian company, I think, is who one of the developers are. Is an Australian company, or at least they did 2 and the pre-sequel. I don't know if they did the original one, but it's essentially Mad Max, is what it is. It's like this weird alien version of Mad Max because it's in like a desert-y kind of thing. And even the space one is like Space Mad Max. It just takes it to the like 11th degree. It just racks up to 11 there. And it is so fun and so crazy and actually quite difficult if you put it on a good difficulty. It's challenging and fun, and it has split-screen multiplayer. So, it is super fun to play with friends.
Yeah. My reaction to BioShock, I've played all 3. BioShock 1, 2, and then Infinite. I enjoyed all 3. I will take the road less traveled as far as opinions say. My favorite is BioShock Infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually prefer the environment to Infinite, or from Infinite to the underwater city Rapture and the original. And that's not to say that the original I didn't enjoy. I enjoyed pretty much everything about the original, but something about Infinite just kind of captured my imagination, and I do enjoy the story even with its kind of craziness at the end. I genuinely loved BioShock Infinite.
Yeah, the city of Columbia in BioShock Infinite is pretty breathtaking. It is. And there's no way around it. It's incredible visually. And there's like a lot of xenophobia in the game that is very interesting, especially playing it in 2018. There's some stuff in that game that you're like, wow, like there's some stuff in here that even characters say when you're passing, you're like, whoa, like
and that's something that the developers for all the BioShock games did so well is they painted in these kind of like social commentaries into the games that really made you like stop and think like, this is kind of a place where video games and art are kind of like colliding.
Yeah, Wolfenstein does that to some extent, but I think BioShock does it better because each of the games has kind of a theme. The last game, which is Infinite for now, I don't know if they're going to do another one, is a lot about a religious zealot starting a cult. And that's all I'm going to say, because there's like a lot of stuff into that you learn throughout the game. But it's about that, and he's kind of a racist. And it's I heard what they based him off of. They based him off a few people. Is what's his face? Jefferson Davis, who was the president of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. They based him off of him. They based him off of the D.W. Griffith, who's a filmmaker who made Birth of a Nation, who is a very famous racist, and Birth of a Nation is about the KKK. And then I'm going to look him up. His name is on the tip of my tongue. His name is... One second, let's see if...
While he's looking that up, yeah, basically like the kind of environment of BioShock Infinite is it takes place in this kind of flying city of Columbia, and there's a large aesthetic of like kind of this Americana, like red, white, and blue American, well, not exactly American flags, but an alternate version of American flags, stars and stripes and all that. And there's a lot of emphasis on the kind of like this twisted version of the founding fathers that like George Washington and Jefferson that plays into the storyline. And I think that was a big thing that I found enjoyable about the story was how they took this xenophobic, racist, like leader of this city who pretty much founded the city and his twisted way of thinking like, oh, this is what the founding fathers would have wanted. And I think that was what really brought it home for me. It was like, wow, this is kind of, it's not the exact place where we're at as a country, even back in 2013 when it came out, but it's just like, there's hints here that like some of the leaders of our country like might see this as like an ideal environment for everyone to live in.
I found him. Ben, if you can see this, I know this is bad radio, but if you look at the picture, he looks a lot like Comstock. This guy?
I don't actually have a connection for video right now.
Oh, okay. Reason. Well, the name of the person I was thinking of is Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was a Confederate general who killed a bunch of people at Fort Pillow in the Civil War, but he was the first leader of the KKK. He
does look like Comstock. Holy shit.
Yes. I don't know if that's an exact thing, but I have heard a lot of speculation and read a lot of articles about who Comstock was really based off of, and a lot of people say Nathan Bedford Forrest. They look very similar. There's a lot of similarities in their story to some extent, and a lot of the xenophobia and racism that is present in the game, but not in a bad... It's not racism as the game is racist, but it points out these racist tendencies that we can have when we become too close-minded, which I really, really do appreciate about the game, even though it's not my favorite gameplay-wise in the series. The story, just in that aspect, the more realistic, grounded, like, whoa side, is very eye-opening, and it's really interesting to play, especially with people who don't play video games. I was playing it, and my parents were watching. I was just playing it, and they were like, wow, like, they went there. And I'm like, yeah, they did go there. GTA does that to some extent. They poke fun at culture, but they don't do it like that. They do it more lighthearted. This game, it's pretty heavy-handed.
Yeah.
It's very heavy-handed.
And especially for a BioShock 1 as well. There's a lot of allusions to like Ayn Rand and her garbage writing, as far as like her kind of or her philosophy on life. What else? Like you seem to be more.
There's hints of like Marxism, this Leninist philosophy, and a lot of this kind of warped idea of leaders and leadership. And when someone takes like a Marxist philosophy to life, and then you run with it and you create this like communist idea or fascist idea, and the games touch on that, but they warp it. If like, what if, and then it's almost like an episode of Black Mirror, like, what if this thing, but then you dial it up to 11 and make it super fucked. That would be the game. But yeah, that's just like my political philosophy classes coming out a little bit. Which is interesting to look at games when you just know a tiny bit about that, like just scratching the surface. You're like, oh wow, that's someone else who made this game also knows this, and they're putting it in there and kind of disseminating this like knowledge to like kids and people playing, and they don't even know what it is, but they hear this thing, and then you're like, oh wow, that is the same as this, because that's where the idea came from. And
yeah, for sure.
And I think that it's kind of like a closing statement. I think that's what makes video games really interesting. It's a good way, if it's used properly, it can educate people. It's fun, it's relaxing, and it's a form of media, even though we're both film people, we're big time movie boys. But it's an interesting way for people to absorb media and entertainment in a more personal way than anything else, because you make your own story in a lot of senses, and you get connected to these characters because you're playing for hundreds of hours. And it really, for all the faults that video games get blamed for and all the great things, it's pretty incredible what we've been able to do.
It is. I think there's a lot of overlap as far as storytelling goes between filmmaking, television, and games.
Yeah,
I think the evolution of storytelling that's come along for video games has leaps and bounds from plumber goes to save princess from dragon.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where it goes and what people do with the storytelling. And I think that's why there has not been any really good video game movies, because they're different forms of media. Like books can be translated into movies quite well. Video games are different because it's a pick your own adventure in a lot of ways. And in a movie, you lose some of that. And I think that's what makes movies bad, or when they try to tie it together too much. Now, if you took a concept like Halo and you just made a war movie in the future, you could probably do that. And you just have a similar name and similar looking characters, but you make your own story. Like, I know they're making a Witcher TV show on Netflix, but that was based off of books. But yeah, I think that's also, in my opinion, Ben, you can disagree, why video game movies have been historically not great.
I agree. And it's also the time limitations of movies, like, hour and a half to 2 hours. You can't properly get the feel of a 20 to 40 hour video game crammed into that. Now Netflix may have some better success with The Witcher, since it's going to be a television series. They're going to have some time to flesh out different storylines, characters, stuff like that. So I'm cautiously optimistic about how that's going to turn out, and I think it's going to be a signifier for whether more television services, whether it be Hulu, Netflix, or maybe even network television, takes chances on video game properties like that. Yeah,
I think so too. And I think as a kind of a last thing to bridge video games and movies are, if you know about the company Telltale, they've made the Walking Dead games, the Game of Thrones, Batman, and my personal favorite, which is The Wolf Among Us. And all of these so far, besides they made a Back to the Future one, all of the other ones are based on comic books. And it's a pick-your-own-adventure game, but they're very dark. They're very rated R. And I think that's where video games and movies, I think, hit their, like, in the Venn diagram, that's their overlap, is those. Because it's essentially just a movie where you get to pick your dialogue and if you're a dick or not. But you technically can do it with a mouse and keyboard. Like, you have one button and you can kind of click what you want. And you can play it with friends, and it's not like you're hogging the controller.
Yeah. Especially, I have not personally played The Wolf Among Us, But especially for the Walking Dead games, like there's very few easy choices in those games.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting because a lot of times in movies you feel these moral choices, and in books as well. But in a game, it gives you a unique opportunity to actually pick that choice and then live with the ramifications of it. And I like that as a story dude.
Yeah. Before we take off, I did have a couple questions left for you.
Yeah.
What's your favorite video game controller that you've ever played with?
I have two answers. I mean, everyone loves a PS3 or PS4 controller. That's not my answer. But it is fantastic. That is the most perfected controller. It is. Like, it is the most refined. They have done it perfectly. But I think my favorite two, I love the Nintendo Wii controllers. I just love it. I think it's so cool. And there's
the nunchucks?
Yeah. I think there's a game called No More Heroes that came out for the Wii. If you don't know what it is, it's like Kill Bill met Star Wars met really weird. And it's on the Wii.
It's a bonkers game.
Yeah. But that game used the joystick nunchuck controller thing perfectly. And that motion idea in games, even if you're sitting on the couch, was so cool. Like the Star Wars Force Unleashed games where you felt like you had the lightsaber in your hand. Very cool. I love that. Also, I know the Wii U didn't do well. I think the gamepad with the screen in it was a very cool idea.
It was an interesting idea. It wasn't implemented well. And
Yes.
I think that the Wii U came out too quickly behind the Wii.
Yeah.
And that was another major problem.
But I do love both of those controllers. I'm not a big Xbox controller fan. I'm just not. But I also love the Steam controller, if you've ever seen it, where it has an actual touchpad. That's very cool.
Yeah, I haven't used it, but it did look like it would be pretty fun to use, actually, for certain games.
It is. It can be really fun for... You can change the controls on it. You can, like, you go in settings and change what it does. But it makes you very precise in certain things. Like, if there's games, like driving games, and you need to be precise, it lets you be precise. Because it's like a trackpad. So,
right.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions?
I think my favorite
controller
was the GameCube controller.
Really?
I think that was one of the most perfectly ergonomic controllers and one of the most comfortable controllers I've ever held.
I agree with comfortable.
I thought it was a joy, an absolute joy to use one of those.
Yeah. I do. I can kind of see that. And it's very like bubbly, but it works because it fits your hands. Like you're saying, it's ergonomic. Sorry. I hit my microphone. But yeah, you know what? They did something really good there. And a lot of controllers, like the Xbox controller, takes a lot of nods from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions for me, Beth?
Do you have any anticipated games? I think we've mentioned Red Dead.
Anticipated games, yes.
Yeah.
There's a game coming out. It's probably my most anticipated besides Spider-Man, which is already out, and it's fantastic. There's a game coming out called Cyberpunk 2077. It looks so crazy. I can't wait.
Yep, same developers as The Witcher.
Yeah, and like the open world they're creating is just really immersive and expansive, and it just gives you a lot of options, and I like that. And it's very morally ambiguous, which I also like in games. There's a Wolf Among Us 2 coming out eventually that I'm excited about. But those are the two big ones that I think really have my attention. I mean, of course, there's good games that will come out and that will definitely be like, I need this. Also, you know what? The new Assassin's Creed game, the one that takes place in Greece, Odyssey, looks really cool. So I may be picking that up. But
okay.
Because that's more like Witchery, you can pick what your character looks like, and there's more choice. I do like that. Even though the old Assassin's Creed I do like the old ones. A lot of people don't. I do like the old Assassin's Creed ones. The pirate one, Black Flag, pretty sweet. But I think Cyberpunk is probably my most anticipated game right now. Yours is probably Red Dead. Mine would be if I could play it.
Yeah, Red Dead in the immediate future. I've already got that pre-ordered, so I'm waiting for that to be dropping next month.
Mm-hmm.
After that, in January, Capcom is releasing a remake of Resident Evil 2.
Really?
Which I'm absolutely giddy about because it's the my favorite game from that series, and Resident Evil is one of my favorite series of video games. It looks gorgeous. How they have remade it. How Capcom redid the first Resident Evil on the GameCube was amazing. So I have every bit of optimism to think that Capcom's going to be doing just the same with number 2.
Oh yeah.
I think honestly that as much fun as I know I'm going to have with Red Dead, I think Resident Evil 2, the remake, is my most anticipated in the next 6 months.
That's a good answer. It's an untraditional answer, but it's good. But yeah, I think you have a soft spot for that. I have a really big soft spot for The Wolf Among Us, just because that game really made you think, and it's really good. If you guys don't know what Fables is, it's a comic or graphic novel series. Definitely look it up. I'm not going to spoil anything because I don't want to. But yeah, play that, Wolf Among Us. It's very film noir and very dark. I will warn you, it is very rated R. There's decapitations. There is nods towards rape, sexual assault, some other pretty heavy topics, like child abuse, spousal abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse. It is a very dark game, but it's very realistic in its own way. It shines a light on us in a very animated way, and it really is very good. I recommend everyone play it if you are in the mental place where you can play that. Very bummer kind of game, because it does not end happy either. There's 10 different endings because you kind of pick. None of them are exactly great. But yeah, I think that's what I'm really excited about.
Awesome.
Yeah, dude. Well, for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed this kind of different spin on what we talk about here. This is See What Sticks. It is a podcast about everything and nothing. If you want to contact the show, there's email, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You know how to get a hold of us. It's always in the description. Thank you again for listening. Ben, what do you got to say?
Nothing this time. I'm going to be 31 in a few days. I'm that much closer to death. Play more video games, Russell. Get a PlayStation.
I know.
Get God of War. Get Horizon. Get Spider-Man. Get Red Dead when it comes out. Get. That's all I have to say about that.
Oh yeah. For all those out there, I'll post on Twitter as well. Give me PS4 game recommendations as well. I would like that because I probably will pick one up here pretty soon. But yeah, thank you, Ben, for being on the show once again. And thank you, listeners.
As always.
Yeah, thank you, listeners, for continuing to be here. I hope you enjoyed. This is episode 46, We Talk Games. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Bye, everybody.